Okay. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the masterclass of using AI in an elementary classroom to support feedback processes. Thank you so much for being here today, and I hope that you enjoy and you can take some things from this webinar, this masterclass for your classrooms as well. So, my name is Urszula Wyss, and I'm an international educator who believes in educating the whole child with focus on emotional and social well-being by connecting imagination and innovation in the classroom. Just really quickly about me, I have a bachelor in elementary education. I've worked with children for about 6 years in education, homeroom in grade 3. I teach English, math, and science. I also have a professional choreography and dance background, which is where my imagination and innovation comes into the classroom. Have won the Outstanding Educator Award last year and have a big focus on teaching children growth mindset and learning through traveling and building community. And in my newest developments, AI. So the objectives of this masterclass is that by the end, you'll be able to define generative AI and identify its specific role in the elementary feedback loop, that you will be able to explain the benefits of immediate low-stakes feedback for young learners. You'll also be able to apply AI tools to generate age-appropriate writing prompts and constructive comments, analyze student work to determine where AI feedback is accurate and where human intervention might be needed, as well as creating weekly feedback stations, such as workflow integrating AI assistance. Your main takeaways from this masterclass will be that efficiency does not mean replacement. That means that AI allows you to give feedback to 30 students in a time that it takes for 5, but you are still the pilot. My main message in this masterclass is not that AI should take over all of teaching, but that it is really important that we work with AI. Feedback must be immediate. That means for elementary students, feedback received days later loses its impact, and AI kind of solves the timeliness gap, which is something we're going to learn more about later. And AI has modeling capabilities. It is excellent at showing students what a good version looks like instantly, kind of acting like a super tutor. So we're going to start with a little icebreaker activity. I love this one. It's called Two Truths and an AI Lie. And you're going to have to choose between 3 paragraphs, short paragraphs, that are written pieces of feedback. I have written 2 of these, and one was written by ChatGPT, and they're all based on an actual student's work from my classroom. It was a procedural writing piece on how to make hot chocolate. So I'm going to read them out to you. And in the chat, as soon as you know which one of these is written by AI, I want you to take a guess. Is it feedback A, feedback B, or feedback C? I'm going to go ahead and read them out to you now. Okay. So feedback A is, this is a really strong start to a writing piece, very organized, clear, and has all necessary components. To take it to the next level, you can add more details to your steps, such as including the length and stirring or sharing how the milk can be warmed up. Also, you can edit your writing to check for small spelling and grammar mistakes. For example, chocolatey, carefully, and optional. Feedback B. You organize your writing really clearly with an introduction, materials, steps, and a conclusion, which makes it easy to follow. Next, try to double check your spelling and punctuation. For example, pour instead of par, so your writing looks even more polished. You can also add a few more details, like how warm the milk should be or how long to stir, to help your reader understand exactly what to do. Or is it feedback C? Wow, that was an amazing start on your procedural writing journey. I'm impressed with your organization by writing an introduction, materials, steps, and conclusion while starting to use descriptive language. Well done. To improve, you can use even more descriptive language by expanding on your steps and telling the reader exactly where to get the ingredients from or how to use the tools. You could also say why these steps are important. Finally, double check your work for spelling can be really helpful. ensuring a polished finish. See if you can scan your writing to see which words you might need to double check. If you're just joining us, we're choosing whether A, B, or C would have been written by AI. And if you can, go ahead and share in the chat which one you think it is. Do you think feedback A was written by ChatGPT? Do you think it might have been feedback B? Or do you think it might have been feedback C? You can just type A, B, or C. I'd love to see your responses. Okay, I'm gonna give you like 10 more seconds. Let's see, which one do you think it is? Okay, I'm not really seeing any responses. That's okay. If you're thinking about it being feedback B, then you did get it correct. However, I do understand this is a tough one because they're all very similar. And so it kind of shows us that AI feedback is actually very similar to what teachers would give us feedback. And it is becoming increasingly difficult to discern what is written by AI and what isn't. So let's see. Feedback is incredibly powerful. In fact, it is one of the most powerful influences on learning and achievement. However, only when it is timely. And this was researched by Hattie and Timperley, who said that feedback is one of the most important aspects of education. This is because feedback answers three essential questions for learners. It answers, where am I going? How am I going? And what are my next steps? So feedback really tells learners about their journey, about where they're at and how they can improve in order to make sure that their next steps are make sure that they're on the correct track, right? And it does this because formative feedback builds self-regulation, which means that students can notice when they're off track and fix it. It also builds metacognition, which means that students understand their own thinking and what they don't know yet. And it helps them think about their own learning and where they want to go from here. And most importantly, the combination of self-regulation and metacognition builds learner agency, in which students can take ownership of their own learning and they can take action to improve their work. By giving students feedback, they are being given the tools of knowing how to learn and how to apply it on their own learning journey. And so in a classroom where students are giving tasks, but no feedback, students actually struggle to learn, and comparatively to a classroom where students are given regular feedback because they know exactly where they're at and where they need to go. In volume, feedback must be immediate. If feedback isn't immediate, the quality of the feedback diminishes. This is because in reality, in a class of like 25 students, reading 25 stories or writing materials and then writing meaningful comments takes hours, if not days and weeks for teachers. And the consequence of that is by the time students get their papers back, they've already mentally moved on. They're not thinking about that particular task or piece of writing that they have done. That means the teachable moment has expired. I had this in my classroom just last week when I was giving my students back summative pieces. It took me about 7 days to mark all of them, but all that students cared about was what grade they got or why they didn't get a better grade. But they didn't really interact with the writing piece as deeply as I would have liked them to. And that's because they got it back after we'd already started a new unit and we weren't able to change or work on the summative piece anymore. So now we know the benefits of immediate low stakes feedback for young learners and why it is so important that it is immediate and that we don't have too much of a gap. So in order to fix that, we're going to introduce AI. But before we talk about how AI can help give feedback, I want to make sure we're on the same page on what type of AI we're talking about. So in our context, we're talking very specifically about generative AI. Generative AI, for example, like ChatGPT or Magic School, is a technology that creates new content based on your instructions. It doesn't just find answers, kind of like Google does or any search engine where you have to look for the answers by researching them. It actually writes them. So that means in a classroom, I want you to think of your classroom of having a very fast, very eager teaching assistant who can read a student's story and suggest at least 3 ways to improve it within like 5 seconds. And imagine every single student has that teaching assistant sitting next to them, just like in the picture here. How cool would that be if a student will get immediate feedback and immediate support all the time? You're still teaching the class, you're still guiding the class. The class wouldn't just be able to work without you, but the teaching assistant is there. And that is the power of AI. That's what AI can be, right? So we're thinking, why should we use AI as early as elementary school? Should students really be exposed to it? But here are 3 reasons why. First of all, like we said, young children need immediate reinforcement. AI can provide instant feedback loops and support that developmental need that children have. It also helps us become future ready. Whether we like it or not, AI is going to be a big part of the children's future. As early as completing assignments with it in middle school and eventually using it for work after in life as adults. And introducing it now in elementary schools is a safe and ethical way to do it because we are still in control of how much we expose students to it. We can use tools that are safe, that have boundaries, and we can teach them about how to use them ethically. And lastly, engagement. Students are often more willing to accept corrections from like a robot than a peer or a teacher, which can reduce social anxiety or simply just increase their motivation. I know when I introduced Magic School to my kids and they were given feedback for their writing pieces, they were engaging with it like it was the most interesting thing that was given to them. When they were able to use AI to research instead of having to research in books, they were so keen and they were having conversations with the tool in order to gain more information. It was a really, really fun class and students really enjoyed it. However, we must teach children to be the captains of the AI ship and not just passengers on the automated journey. This means that students need to be taught how to use AI and why we use it and when to use it, rather than just letting them be introduced to it without those barriers, without those guidances, and then have them figure it out themselves and ultimately have AI be the captain of the ship. Right? So here's how AI kind of links to feedback and how it helps feedback compared to the traditional one. So first of all, AI assisted feedback happens in seconds. It happens instantly. Traditional feedback, like we talked about, is delayed. It takes days. It depends on the teacher. It depends on the teacher's workload. It depends on other circumstances that are happening in school and available time. There's so many different factors. AI doesn't have those factors. Also, with it taking such a long time, the frequency decreases. So teachers might only be able to give feedback once an assignment, whereas AI can give feedback multiple times. And every time a student has a revision, they can be given feedback again and again and again, and they can keep improving in that cycle. And a really fun part about it is AI feedback can be given in different tones. You can change it to be a pirate tone. You can change it to come to like be in a coaching style. You can change the voice and the way that the AI is giving feedback, which helps differentiate towards students. Whereas in the tone for a teacher, we can't really change our tone that much. We just give it in our own way. And so there's less variation for students to choose from. Here is a quick video to show you how AI can be used in a school and how this particular teacher is finding the use of AI. This is not in an elementary classroom. He uses it in a middle and high school classroom, but the way that he uses it and describes it is still very applicable to elementary classrooms as well. Here we go.
Here it is, the argument essay. It's a yes/no question that needs an answer in the intro. Because I've taught for close to 20 years, I've taught almost every English class the school has offered. Why did the author want to write these 4 paragraphs? I've wanted to be a teacher since I was 10 years old. Initially, I thought it was a job that would garner you respect as an adult. as I got older, I fell in love with literature and have lucked into a dream job. OpenAI dropped ChatGPT on all of us last November. My initial reaction was terror. The summer began with me sitting in on conversations about how to adapt AI for the classroom. And by July, we began a partnership with a company called PlayLab that provided an open platform for teachers to create their own AI bots. I'm going on to Project Tony. It's an AI chatbot that can be a teaching. I'm going to put in the assignment. It is designed to read articles that students are also reading so they can engage in the conversation to begin the revision process. Tony will provide strengths and areas for improvement for each paragraph. The problem that I had in mind was largely the jealousy I felt toward math teachers and science teachers who can give instant feedback to students during tutoring. If I assign a 5-page essay, that's a 500-page novel that I would have to get through. Before Tony existed, the feedback cycle largely mimicked the letter writing that you would see in Jane Austen movies, roughly 2 to 3 weeks. And this shrinks that feedback cycle to 24 to 72 hours. Remember what I told you on Tuesday? Introducing Project Tony into the classroom has been fascinating. What I'm discovering is that I'm needing to teach them how to use it well. Just press 1 and Tony will give paragraph by paragraph suggestions. It's not Alexa or Google. You don't just give it simple commands. You have to engage with it. Specifically, could you elaborate on why this was a poor example? And it will give you 2 to 3 sentences of explanation. And you can convince Tony that it was incorrect. But what that takes is for you to make a stand for your own writing, which is such a huge move in a writer's psychology, to have the confidence in your own sentences, where often students are coming from a space of doubt and fear. You're entering in a partnership the way a professional writer and a professional editor enters into a conversation, and they're both engaged in trying to make the writing better. The key is the purpose. One of the goals of being a good teacher is to give them academic attention and show them how intelligent they are. What I enjoy most about teaching writing is seeing growth in one of my students. It fills me up the way a great sentence in a novel fills me up. It's a really fulfilling experience. My name is Adrian Anteo, and this is my brief but spectacular take on harnessing AI in schools.
Right, okay.
Here it is.
Okay, and we have now achieved the next objective. Once it loads, to define generative AI and identify its specific role in the elementary feedback loop. Something that I really love about that video is that he explains that students have to engage with AI, and that it's not just AI telling students what to do or how to work with it, but that students really have to take ownership of their own learning and ask it questions and ask it to elaborate. And that is such an important tool and can foster all of these skills that we want students to have with critical thinking. There was an instant in my own classroom where that was really helpful, and where students were engaging in that similar way, where I noticed that students that normally wouldn't raise their hand so much or ask questions so much were suddenly engaging with the AI bots that I gave them to ask more about their writing. And I have all of their chats. I can see them in the back end. And I was amazed at how some students were asking it questions of, what do you mean by that? How can I improve my introduction? Why is it this way? And I looked at their questions. I was like, wow, you don't ask these questions in the classroom. And so it was really nice to see that some of the students who might not always be as vocal in the classroom were more vocal with the AI bot. And through that, I could kind of gauge more of an insight into what sort of questions they asked and where they want to improve. And that then also helped me build a connection to them and help me connect to their writing more the next time that I had a writing lesson. So not only is it really useful in providing the feedback, but it's very useful in supporting the engagement in students that you would not normally not see. So that was really amazing to witness. So now that we've kind of talked about AI and why it's useful, I want to introduce you to a very specific tool that I've been using in my classroom and that might be very useful in your classroom as well. So the tool that I've been working with is Magic School, and it's an AI platform that is built specifically for teachers. So kind of different to ChatGPT or other AI tools, it is FARA and COPPA compliant and has tools designed for K-12 needs, which basically just means that it's safer to use for teachers and for students. It has like over 50 tools ranging from lesson planning to IEP generation to creating jokes of the day, as well as a writing feedback tool. And this feedback tool can be used by students directly and can be integrated in a whole class. So the function of this tool is that it allows you to paste student work and then select a specific criteria for the AI tool to give them feedback on. So this could be grammar, expanding on ideas, structure, to the rubric that you're going to grade the students on as well. And the cool thing is, because I work in grade 3, my students are not typing up their responses. They are, in fact, they are still writing using their pencil and hand, right? And they can take pictures of their work and still upload them in Magic School. So you don't necessarily have to have typed up work in order to put it in. And the output of the tool is that it creates structured feedback. It usually works in a glow and grow format. So it starts out with strengths and then gives areas for improvement that is easy for a child to understand. So here is how I structured one of my bots, and the one that I actually used in my classroom. This was for procedural writing, the how-to task about, and students had to write a procedural text about how to make a winter drink. The goal was that they used AI to give feedback specifically on expanding their introduction and conclusion. So as you can see here, this is the bot. Then on the tool description, it says get feedback on your writing, my grade 3 level. And then here I kind of described the assignment. This wasn't a graded assignment. It was more of a practice assignment. So I told the bot what they're doing. And I told the bot that their instructions were to follow along a child-friendly rubric attached. And then students who finished write out the steps and materials needed. So then the bot looked at the rubric that I was given them and used that to assess them and give them feedback on it. Here is one of my students' piece of writing. This particular student had started off making hot chocolate and had to write an introduction and conclusion using sentence starters, list the materials needed, and list the steps using clear linking words and imperative verbs. Now, this student then took a picture of their writing, uploaded it into Magic School AI, and this is the feedback that Magic School gave the student. It is a very long list of feedback. I'm not going to read out the whole thing to you, but I'm going to highlight a couple of areas. So for example, it starts out with the area of strength and said, your introduction does a great job hooking the reader by asking, do you want a warm, yummy drink or on a winter day? This makes me want to keep reading. So the student reads this and goes, whoa, I did a really good job with that. And it's very specific on what they did well. Then, for example, in areas of growth, it says, try to make your introduction even more exciting by adding why hot chocolate is special for winter days or what makes it taste so good. What I really like about this particular piece of feedback is that it tells the student how to improve, but it doesn't give them the answer. It doesn't tell them the sentence that they should copy down, but it makes the student think about what is next. This is very similar to what the feedback would be if I were to give it to the student and I were to read it and I would tell the student, oh, this is really good. Can you add why hot chocolate is special in winter? So this is, I believe, very good feedback. And then at the very end, you also see feedback for writing mechanics. For example, it says you're already doing great with capital letters at the beginning of sentences, but then it says in your conclusion, you need a period after chocolate in the sentence, enjoy your hot chocolate, drink it carefully. right? So it also tells the students little bits of detail about how to improve their grammar. And that's something that I noticed on grade 3 level. A lot of the students are forgetting their punctuation or are forgetting capital letters. And sometimes they just need a reminder to be like, remember your punctuation. And some students need to be told where to add the punctuation. And I cannot physically make sure that all of my 20 students have had their work read and supported with where to add punctuation and within a 20-minute writing period. However, if they have AI giving them that instant feedback, they're able to see where they need to input the punctuation, are able to do it straight away, and are able to improve their writing on the spot. I asked my students for some feedback on how they liked this particular way of receiving feedback from AI, and I had some mixed reports. Some of my students said, I really love how it gives me so much detail. I also had other students say, it's kind of too much. I'm getting lost with so many details. I don't want to know what I did well. I just want to know very clearly the parts that I need to improve on, or it makes me feel like I have so much to improve on because there's so many points. So it's very different in how students are receiving this feedback. And so a really important part about introducing students to AI and to the feedback mechanism is making sure that they have a part in it and making sure that I take their inputs and their feedback seriously as well, and that we talk about how we can improve the system for them. I'll chat a little bit more about that later and what I did with their feedback, but just so that you have an idea, because you're seeing the feedback given right now and how my students responded to it. And here is the students writing after the feedback was given. You can see here the student added a reason why hot chocolate is special in the introduction in the last sentence, that it says, the warm taste will make you feel warm inside. They also adjusted the materials list to match the procedural steps, so there's more materials in. And they also made the grammar and punctuation adjustments here at the end. There is a full stop here now. So if I just go back 2 slides, look at this piece of writing here, and then forward 2 slides, you can see that it is fuller and that there's more detail attached after the feedback was given. This student did this completely independently. I did not have to help this student. I only helped with the technology of actually getting the work uploaded in the very beginning, but then the student did all of this by themselves, and I was very proud of them. So there are also other feedback tools. I'm not here to tell you Magic School is the feedback tool you have to use. It is just a tool that my school uses and that I've been comfortable with. But there are other ones. One is called Brisk Teaching. It works similar to Magic School. It kind of works with the Glow and Grow. There's also Canva Magic Write, which helps students brainstorm sentence starters when they're stuck. And there's also one called Reading Progress, which automatically analyzes reading fluency and error rates, which gives students immediate data on their pacing. So that one's more based on reading feedback. Why is it useful to have this? I think I've kind of shared a lot of details, but in a busy classroom, unfortunately, oftentimes only the loudest students or those that are struggling a lot get immediate help. Sometimes in a class of 20, in a 20 or 30-minute writing period, some students might not have been visited by the teacher at all, especially if there's 1 or 2 students that need a lot of one-on-one support. And so AI ensures that those middle students that normally kind of work independently, but might need support, who often get overlooked, receive the same detailed, personalized attention as everybody else, right? So I have a question for you. And you're very welcome to think about it in your head, or you can share it in the chat. I've talked a lot now. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which benefit of AI feedback is most valuable to you in your classroom context? And it can be a combination of things, or it might be one of these or something else. Do you think like timeliness, the fact that it gives an instant response is the most helpful, the fact that it's personalized and adapted to the student's level, or that it is anonymous in the sense that students don't know what each other's feedback is because each student will get their own feedback. And so there's low stakes environments, so students might feel more comfortable asking questions rather than asking in front of the whole class. Go ahead and share in the chat box. You can share just A, B, or C. You can add Y. I'd love to hear from you, to see what you are thinking. For example, I definitely know in my classroom, the timeliness thing is a huge plus. The fact that my students just get immediate feedback and can go ahead and straight away improve their writing, and it makes them more independent, which is something that's really good in my classroom. Okay, we have personalization. Oh, very nice. Yeah, adapting. We've got timeliness. Nice. Thank you guys so much for sharing. Yeah. So everyone is different, and for everyone, it will have different values to your classroom, right? Okay. So, however, as with everything, it's never like just all benefits and no issues. There are really important considerations to make with AI. So the golden rule, and I'm sure we all know this, but it's still important to say, to never put personally identifiable information, such as full names or ID numbers, into a public AI tool. Even something like Magic School, it does flag if you put in personal information, but you still want to be careful. Just make it a golden rule to never do that, and then you're on the safe side. Also, time needs to be invested into teaching how to use the tool. So I understand that just by telling you right now about why AI is important and how it can help, you're still going to have to invest time into actually figuring out how you're going to use it in your classroom. It took me some time too, and before I implemented it in my classroom, I had to experiment with it at home. So I had a student writing piece, I uploaded it, I wanted to see what the feedback was like. I adjusted the prompt slightly until I got really comfortable with the prompt. And I also prepared my lesson about how I was going to introduce it to this, because in my last point, ethics and critical questioning needs to be taught so students understand that the feedback tool is not always right, and that they also question the outputs. So they need to be, first of all, taught how to use it, why it's important. They need to be taught how to chat with it and not to misuse it. So students know, for example, that I can see all of their chats, and they know that they need to use it responsibly, and they know that they're not allowed to go off topic. And the cool thing is Magic School doesn't allow them to go off topic. So they have to stay on topic of asking for feedback for their writing, for example. So it's also important to know that the AI tool might be wrong. And it was actually really interesting because when I asked my students for feedback on the AI process, one of the students complained and said, "But Miss, it told me that I didn't do this, but I did do it." And I got really frustrated because it kept telling me to improve this one point, but I really did do it. And when I checked this student's writing, the student was right. And it was, in fact, an error in AI. And I was so proud of that student bringing it up, because it started a conversation in the class that it is not always right, and that they have to question the feedback and not just take it as it is, and not just be like, well, Magic School told me I need to change this sentence, so I'm going to change the sentence. But it really helps them think critically about it. And it was very useful to have that conversation. So those are conversations to have with students. That means AI will save you time in the future, but when you're introducing it, please make sure that you take the time to go through it and take a full lesson for it, so that students in the future know how to use it responsibly. Because if they don't use it responsibly, it can backfire and it can cause you more stress than it does relief. So that's a really important point. Also, kind of working on that, it is important that us teachers don't fully rely on AI. So the best way to use AI is what I call in a human sandwich. That means us as teachers, we need to create the assignments and the prompts, or teach students how to make good prompts. So the planning phase is very humanized. We don't ask AI to plan everything. We can let it help us, but it still has to come from us. The AI tool then initiates the initial feedback loop. So what I always do is I get my students to do their first draft, and their first draft, before it is viewed by me, gets an AI screening. But the final judgment, the final grade, and the final emotional connection comes through me. So the teachers need to make sure that we're the beginning and the end of the process, and that we're not relying on AI. So just because AI said that the student had a good introduction doesn't mean that we just take that comment and then give them a grade based on the AI feedback. We still have to do the reading of their work, and we still have to make sure that we're cross-checking to see. So AI is kind of useful as a middle that middle step. So speaking of that, I now introduced a lot of kind of like drawbacks or just considerations that we have to make. What is your biggest hesitation? If you're kind of like right now, like, oh, I love to implement AI, but I don't really know how, or something's like makes you feel uncomfortable. Which of these three is it? Or is it something else that's kind of holding you back? Is it because maybe technology, the learning curve is really big? Like maybe you're nervous about how much you have to learn in order to get ready, like the time invested. Maybe you have a fear of AI not giving the correct feedback. It's hard to give up that control sometimes. We want to be in control. Or maybe you're worried about student data privacy. That's definitely something that I was worried about as well. Okay. We've got A, B, A. So mostly technology learning curve. Yeah, I understand. And the fear of inaccurate feedback. Both of those are very, very relevant hesitations, and I absolutely understand them. The technology learning curve is one that takes a little bit of time, but once you've kind of gotten the hang of it, it is awesome. That's all I can say. It really helps you become a faster teacher. It helps you to help students go deeper and think more critically. But I see the majority here is like also really nervous about the fear of inaccurate feedback, which I totally think it's so important that we teach students to look out for it, because they're going to use ChatGPT and AI anyway, right? So they're going to be confronted with a lot of inaccurate information, whether it's through AI or through research or anything. So it's actually the perfect time to teach them about how to deal with that, and how to kind of become self-reliant as well, and to become metacognitive and give themselves feedback and look at their own writing and be like, what does good feedback look like? So yeah, I absolutely agree with you guys. Thank you for sharing that. Um, we've now kind of we've now achieved two more objectives and we have one left. So now you know how to apply AI tools to generate age-appropriate writing, know how to analyze student work to determine where AI feedback is accurate and where maybe human intervention is needed. And here comes the fun part. This is how you can implement AI in your own classroom to give feedback. I call this like the AI feedback station. And it kind of works by providing consistent, low-stake formative feedback while the teacher works in small groups. So here's what you can do to set up these stations. Okay, so once your students are introduced to AI, this is after you've taught them how to use the tool, you've taught them how to question the tool. What you can do is your students can submit it for their very first draft by pasting the Magic School. You can put up a QR code for the student room that students can use. They scan the QR code on their device, and then they open up the chat, the chat box. In that chat box, they're going to take a picture and submit their work. Or if they are working on laptops and it's digital, they just copy paste their work into the AI tool. Right? Then the student will receive the glow and grow feedback and will immediately revise their work based on that feedback. After they have gotten that feedback and they've done the revision, they will pass their writing to you, or you can go into the AI tool and check their work from the AI tool. You can also generate a comment based on their work. The comment will be summarizing their progress so far. So it will tell you what the student was working on, and it will give you the same feedback. Based on that, as well as looking at their work, you can then quickly kind of create, say, 4 groups. And you can group the students according to needs and according to their strengths. Maybe this group of student needs grammar work. Maybe the other group of student isn't sure how to develop their details. Maybe another group of student is ready to go to the next level by adding more description, adding more complex sentences. And so by having these groups, you can then start to make small stations. So your small group is working with you on the identified need, and everybody else can continue using AI as their feedback tool. Because even though they might have revised it once, they can keep uploading the revisions and they can keep getting feedback and keep revising their work to go deeper and do better. Right? So here, you're not being replaced by AI. That's not possible, right? You are still the coach, the verifier, you're the emotional connector. You're trying to figure out what your students need, and then you're helping them with that need as you're differentiating. The AI is kind of just like the first pass feedback generator. The AI can help you group students, it can help you see where they're at and what they need, but you still have to make that call on making sure that then the students are taught where their gaps are. So it just kind of helps you with that first step. And it also can help you with classroom management, because as you're working with the small group and everybody else is working with AI, everyone else has a tutor, so to speak, right? They have a tutor that helps them with something that you programmed the tutor to do. So you're programming that tutor, so they have almost like a digital version of you, while there's one group that has the human version of you. And every like 10 minutes, you can change stations, and then your students will still get a version of you, right? So this is one way you can do it, one possible solution of how you could implement it in your classroom. And so now we know how to create a weekly feedback station workflow integrating AI assistance. So in conclusion, and by the way, if you have any questions, you're welcome to start like putting them into the chat box as I'm kind of wrapping up, and then I'd love to answer all of your questions in the end. So in conclusion, feedback is important. We know that feedback is the most powerful tool in education, I would argue. That is my personal opinion, because it is how students grow. It's how they know where they're at and how they know where they need to go. With AI, how and how often we give feedback can change. It means it can give students more feedback, and it reduces that feedback loop, that feedback gap, right? So yet it is up to teachers to introduce this tool ethically and effectively. The tool can be misused, and it can be used not wrongly, but it can be used in a way that doesn't support students if it is not introduced intentionally. So teachers, before we introduce this tool, it's just really important that we know what we want, that our objectives is clear, and that we have very clear expectations with the students of how to use that tool, right? So now, in this new kind of AI age, we are moving from assigning to grading to returning everything ourselves to this new loop of the human sandwich to assign, AI gets feedback, students revise, and then teacher mentorship. And then we mentor them into the final summative piece. So by leveraging AI for the heavy lifting of basic feedback, we return to our core purpose, which is building relationships and fostering deep critical thinking with students. That doesn't change. That basic need in education is not being taken away. I'm not saying we need to replace anything that we're doing, but we're simply helping give students more access to feedback. We're helping them think more critically, and ultimately, if we use it right, it helps us build better relationships with our students. And so here are our final objectives. I've read them out a few times, so now we're able to do all of these things. And our takeaways, as a reminder, are efficiency does not mean replacement. You take for 5, but you are still the pilot. Feedback must be immediate, for elementary students especially. If feedback is received days later, it loses its impact, and AI solves that gap. And also AI can show students what a good version looks like. We haven't talked about that too much at this point, but it does, through the feedback, tell students this is how it would look good, and that can help them. And some like usual questions that we have around AI, some frequently asked questions are, does using AI feedback count as cheating? Oh, there's a lot of research out there that students are cheating using AI, that students are misusing it. But using it as feedback, no, it is not cheating, especially when it's used formatively. AI is your tutor. We still grade the final product. Teachers need to grade that, which the student revises themselves, right? So as long as we're not relying on AI to do the work for us, and as long as we're not letting students use AI for that very final round, it is definitely not cheating. And we need to make sure, so we need to make sure that we program the bot properly. If we just let students paste their work into ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT spits out like a version of their work that is better, yes, then that is cheating. That's not giving feedback. That's asking AI to do the work for you. But asking AI to give feedback in the way that I kind of showed you with Magic School, and where it says, why don't you expand on this by thinking about this? That is not cheating. That is simply using feedback and thinking critically. Students who struggle with implementing feedback will still struggle with this. And there are ways that we can program the bots to kind of help them with it by saying use more student-friendly language, or give them one example of how to do it and then prompt them to try to use a different example. So there's this feedback and not doing the work for them. It is not considered cheating. Will it replace teacher grading? I think I've answered this question a couple of times, but just to make it like really, really clear, absolutely not. AI handles that first pass because we have that human sandwich. The teacher is still needed for checking voice, truth, and nuance, and giving that final grade. So it is not replaceable. These are my references. And up last, if you want to follow ITU, they do have an Instagram account, so you can stay updated there for more masterclasses and lots of other things coming up. And I want to say thank you.